Hello and welcome to the deep dive. This is where we sift through stacks of sources, articles, research, you name it, to pull out the key insights, basically giving you a shortcut to being really well informed on a topic. Today, we're stepping right into the spotlight, grabbing the mic, and asking a question that seems to be bouncing around comedy clubs and streaming specials everywhere. What is the real state of stand-up comedy right now? Our research suggests there's this divergence, maybe a fault line, you could call it, splitting the art form. On one side, you've got that really sharp, politically charged satire, and on the other, well, what some in the industry are calling actual comedy, observational stuff, storytelling, humor just for the sake of being funny. So the big question we're diving into is one actually winning out over the other? Are we, like, losing the art of the simple joke because everyone's so focused on outrage? Or is it, well, more complicated? This deep dive is your way to get up to speed on this whole cultural thing, hopefully giving you some aha moments and maybe some surprising facts about how comedy reflects society. And joining me to unpack this complex, and let's face it, often hilarious world, is an expert cultural critic who's looked really closely at the economics of entertainment and even how laughter works. It's great to have you.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine. It's a topic I find endlessly fascinating. And honestly, it tells us so much about where we are as a society, not just culturally, but, psychologically too.
That's interesting. Yeah, our sources touch on that, how human connection sort of underpins these bigger cultural shifts. So, okay, let's start right at the beginning with the basics. Our sources use these terms, satire and actual comedy, to describe this divide. Can you help us pin those down? What exactly is actual comedy in this context?
Absolutely. And it's a really key distinction for everything else we're going to talk about. Actual comedy, as it's being framed here, is basically humor, where the primary goal is just to get laughs.
Yeah.
Pure, simple laughter. And maybe some catharsis. It's usually grounded in things we all recognize, those universal observations, relatable situations, personal stories. Sometimes it gets absurd, often it's self-deprecating. But the key thing is, its main purpose isn't to critique or change some political or social issue. The goal is the entertainment itself, that feeling of release when you just laugh. The laugh is the destination.
Right. So it's not just about, like, a quick punchline. Our sources talk about the rhythm, the structure often involved, like a setup, then maybe a delay before the reveal, and then maybe looping back later. You think of someone like Jerry Seinfeld. Right. His whole career is built on tiny, everyday things. Like the airplane piano, not some grand political statement, but the little rapper. And he spins this whole bit about how illogical it is. Or the double dip.
Exactly.
It's not about what's wrong with the world, but what's funny and weird about how we live in it. The humor comes from that instant, like, oh yeah, I've thought that too moment.
That's it. Perfectly.
Yeah.
It's comedy that invites you to laugh with the comedian.
Yeah.
At ourselves, really.
Yeah.
Our shared quirks. You see it with Jim Gaffigan, too. He does whole hours on universal stuff like food. Remember the Hot Pockets routine?
Oh yeah, iconic.
The humor isn't a critique of processed food, right? It's about that relatable, almost embarrassing feeling of eating something you know is kind of artificial, but it's good.
Yeah.
Or just laziness. We all get that. Or Nate Bargatze, super laid back, clean, deadpan style. He talks about his family, everyday things. And it's hilarious because we recognize it, like, dealing with a gas station transaction, or how absurd technology can be. And then you've got master storytellers like Mike Birbiglia. His stuff is deeply personal, specific life events, but again, not really political. Sleepwalk with Me, for example, is this vulnerable story about a sleep disorder, relationships. But the humor is in the shared human stuff. Vulnerability, anxiety, find the funny in tough spots. It's that shared experience, laughing with them.
Okay, so that's actual comedy. Now, how does satire fit in? How is it different?
Right. So satire uses the same tools, really irony, sarcasm, ridicule, exaggeration, hyperbole. But its primary intent, its main goal, is fundamentally different. It's not just aiming to entertain. It wants to make you think, to challenge norms, expose hypocrisy, and often, maybe inspire some kind of social or political change.
So the humor it's like the delivery system, not the final product itself. It gets you to engage with something maybe uncomfortable.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the laughter it gets often has this intellectual edge to it. You're not just laughing out of the blue. You're recognizing an underlying critique, right? A sharp point about society or politics. Our sources really break down the rhetorical tricks, using hyperbole to show how ridiculous a policy is, or understatement to highlight a contrast, or putting two things together that don't belong just to make you think. It's a more cerebral kind of laugh. It sparks amusement, but also your brain starts processing it at the same time. And it's more than just validation. There's this cognitive aha. moment. The sources talk about the benign violation theory. Something seems wrong, but it's presented harmlessly through humor. So satirical comedians kind of sneak past our defenses. They present these tough truths in a way that laughter makes easier to swallow, maybe making the critique stick better than just reading a news article. It can subtly shift your perspective.
That makes sense. Thinking about George Carlin's later stuff, like the seven dirty words, on the surface, it's about swearing, right?
Right.
But he was really digging into why those words were taboo, exposing the hypocrisy of society being okay with violence, but freaking out over a word. It wasn't just about the words themselves. It was censorship. Who decides what's okay? A big commentary hidden in a rant about language.
Exactly. Or look at John Oliver today on Last Week Tonight. Those long segments. They're deeply researched, super critical of institutions, policies, and they are genuinely funny. But the humor is doing a job there. It's the sugar that makes the medicine go down, as they say, making complex, often infuriating topics easier to digest and remember. So the message lands.
And this leads to comedians becoming almost social commentators. Figures like Trevor Noah, Hassan Minhaj, Michelle Wolf seem to really lean into that role in their specials.
Yeah, they really do. Their sets often grapple with huge issues: global politics, systemic racism, gender inequality. The jokes are sharp, no doubt, but they're clearly serving a bigger point, a critique of society. Trevor Noah uses his unique background to dissect global politics, connecting it back to human experiences. Hassan Minhaj blends investigative journalism with personal stories in shows like Patriot Act to expose systemic problems.
Okay, so you've laid out this core tension really clearly. Both are totally valid forms of comedy. Both can be massively successful. But their methods, their goals, even the type of laughter they're going for, they're just fundamentally different, and that's the fault line we're looking at. Now, this isn't exactly new, right? Our sources suggest these two threads go back quite a way. When did this divide really start to widen?
Oh, yeah. Deep historical roots. You could even argue medieval jesters did both. They had to be funny, do physical stuff, but they also had that unique license to maybe poke fun at the king. But modern stand-up, the kind that really took shape in vaudeville late 19th, early 20th century, there was overwhelmingly actual comedy. Performers like Bob Hope, George Burns, absolute masters. Clean, witty one-liners, relatable stories about universal things like marriage frustrations or just human quirks. It was all designed for mass entertainment and, crucially, not to cause offense. That really set the foundation. The main goal was just entertain, get those broad laughs.
Like Bob Hope's rapid-fire jokes about golf or Hollywood.
Yeah, perfect timing. Or George Burns with the cigar, that deadpan delivery, talking about getting old or marriage in a way that was just charming to everyone.
So that observational, clean, broad appeal humor was the foundation, the basic language of stand-up. But then, mid-20th century, things started to change a lot. That fault line started cracking open.
Oh, absolutely. It was a seismic shift,
Yeah.
really fueled by the counterculture movements of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And if you need to point to one person who was the catalyst, it has to be Lenny Bruce. In that era, Bruce got on stage and didn't just tell jokes like Hope or Burns. He started taking apart societal hypocrisy, challenging norms about religion, politics, sex, even the words people used. His act was so provocative, so new that he was constantly getting arrested for obscenity,
Yeah.
facing trials just for saying certain words. You're talking about taboo things.
Wow, like actual legal trouble for his act.
Yeah, famously arrested in Chicago for a performance where he used explicit language, discussed things like abortion, the Catholic Church, stuff nobody else was touching on stage. He showed, often paying a huge personal price for it, that stand-up could be serious, even dangerous, a vehicle for real social critique. He basically sacrificed his career, maybe even his life, because of the constant legal battles and being blacklisted. But he absolutely paved the way for everyone who followed, proved the mic could be more than just for laughs. That's when the ground really shifted. That crack became a chasm.
And that's when the satirical line really starts to gain traction, building on what Bruce started. You get people like George Carlin,
Right.
who famously went from this clean-cut guy in the 60s to this, like, counterculture philosopher in the 70s and onwards, using his wit to dissect language, politics, social issues with more and more bite.
And Richard Pryor, who brought this incredible raw honesty, talking about race, addiction, his own chaotic life so openly.
Pryor's live, in concert. It's a masterclass, isn't it? Blending super personal stories with this powerful, sometimes really uncomfortable social critique, making audiences face tough truths.
Exactly. Their work cemented the idea that stand-up could be this platform for deep commentary, a way to look at society's flaws. But here's what's really interesting, and our sources emphasize this.
Yeah.
Even as satire was gaining all this power and, frankly, prestige, Actual comedy didn't vanish. Not at all. In fact, the 1980s saw this massive comedy boom, clubs popping up everywhere, cable specials, and audiences were hungry for laughs that weren't necessarily political.
Ah, the golden age of actual comedy, some call it.
You could definitely say that. Jerry Seinfeld wasn't just big, he was a cultural phenomenon, proving that humor about, cereal boxes or dating or waiting in line, it resonated hugely with mainstream America. He built an empire on relatability, not outrage. And Brian Regan, too, built this massive, loyal following with just brilliantly crafted observational bits about toasters or trying to explain things to his kids. Lots of physical comedy, too. All totally clean, no political edge.
Right.
This wasn't just a blip. It proved there was this huge audience that just wanted to laugh, without feeling like they were getting a lecture or being challenged on big societal things. It showed the enduring appeal of that foundational style.
So it's like there's always been this dual track, this fault line running through stand-up. They've coexisted. Maybe one gets more attention sometimes, but both are always there, serving different needs.
I think that's exactly right. The history shows this continuous interplay, a kind of comedic dance. Actual comedy is maybe the bedrock, the universal language of stand-up, the shared human stuff we all get. And satire is this powerful, often reactive force. It bubbles up more strongly in response to specific political moments or times of big cultural change.
Okay, and that ebb and flow brings us right up to today, where it feels like the tide is overwhelmingly flowing towards satire, which leads to the big question, why now? What's driving this perception?
It definitely feels like we're at a peak satire moment, doesn't it? And the sources point to several big reasons. I think the number one driver has to be the current political climate itself. We're living in such a highly polarized time, not just in the U.S., but you see it in the U.K., other places too. And that just creates this incredibly fertile ground for comedians to pick apart the absurdities, the hypocrisies, the sheer messiness of public debate.
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of material.
Right. And for audiences feeling frustrated or overwhelmed or just plain angry about the news, comedy becomes this release valve. It's catharsis. When a comedian gets up there and perfectly articulates your frustration, maybe in a way you couldn't quite nail yourself, that creates this really powerful feeling of validation. Like, okay, I'm not crazy for thinking this. That shared recognition is huge.
And that ties into that thing the critics in our sources call clapter, right? Where people applaud a political point more than they laugh at the joke itself. I actually saw a set recently, won't name names, but the applause after some biting political lines was definitely louder and lasted longer than the laughs. It was noticeable. You could feel that shift you're describing.
Exactly. That's a key sign of this trend. It shows the audience's main connection might be intellectual agreement, not just pure amusement. Another big factor, the way comedians are seen now as trusted social commentators. Trust in traditional media and political institutions. It's been declining for a while now. Our sources track this pretty clearly.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend.
So some audiences are turning to comedians as more authentic, more trustworthy voices. Maybe because they seem to operate outside the usual power structures, without the usual filters, like they have this unique, maybe slightly rogue authority. Jon Stewart really blazed that trail on The Daily Show, and now you see it with John Oliver, Trevor Noah. They've built brands around being seen as more honest, even if satirical, than the actual news sometimes. Speaking truth to power, but with jokes.
And the media landscape itself must be a huge driver, too. The 24/7 news cycle, the constant flood from social media. It's just endless material, isn't it?
Endless material, yeah. And crucially, think about how social media platforms work. Their algorithms reward topicality and controversy.
Oh, right. Virality.
Exactly. Content that gets quick engagement, likes, shares, arguments in the comments gets boosted. A clip of a comedian destroying a politician or nailing a social issue. That's way more likely to go viral on TikTok or Twitter than, say, a beautifully crafted 5-minute bit about trying to assemble IKEA furniture.
Huh. Probably true.
The algorithms favor the hot take, the instant reaction, the stuff that sparks debate. It creates these echo chambers where political content just thrives.
Yeah.
And the streaming giants, Netflix, HBO, the main places people watch specials, now they know this, they invest heavily in comedians who generate buzz. And often that buzz comes from controversy, political relevance, being topical. It feeds itself.
Our sources also bring up the impact of social justice movements, Black Lives Matter, #MeToo, and others. Comedians are cultural commentators, so naturally they're engaging with these huge societal shifts. It almost feels like an expectation now. If you have a platform, say something meaningful.
It absolutely does feel like that. There's definitely an audience expectation, especially maybe with younger audiences,
Hmm.
that if you have that kind of reach, you should use it to contribute to these important conversations. And satire is the perfect tool for that, right?
Yeah.
It's a critique, challenge, raise awareness, all wrapped up in humor. So you put it all together, this polarized climate providing
Sure.
endless material. A public maybe losing trust in traditional sources and looking for authentic voices, and a media system that rewards provocative, topical stuff. It's like the perfect storm for satire to surge. Makes it feel dominant right now.
It really does paint that picture. It makes it seem like actual comedy might be struggling, like that fault line is shifted entirely. But
Yeah.
the sources suggest maybe reports of its death are greatly exaggerated.
Oh, absolutely. Greatly exaggerated. And this is the really important counter-narrative that often gets missed if you're only looking at mainstream media or awards chatter.
Hmm.
Satire gets a lot of visibility, sure, late-night shows, award ceremonies.
Hmm.
It creates this perception. But if you look at the actual commercial numbers, especially live touring, ticket sales, a completely different and really strong picture emerges.
Mhm.
Our sources point out, for example, that in 2024, the top-grossing comedian on tour was Nate Bargatze.
Nate Bargatze? Really? Wow.
Yeah, his Be Funny tour was huge, selling out massive venues like 10,000-seat arenas, often multiple nights in cities across the country. And his comedy is pure actual comedy. Clean, observational, super relatable, and pointedly not political.
Yeah.
He jokes about everyday stuff, trying to use his smart home, family vacations, explicitly avoids controversy.
So while the satirists get the headlines and the think pieces and the viral clips, guys like Bargatze, Jim Gaffigan, Brian Regan are just quietly selling out enormous arenas night after night, raking it in.
That's exactly it. And maybe part of why it's overlooked is, as you suggested earlier, neutrality makes it less newsworthy in the traditional sense. It doesn't spark outrage or debate. But its quiet, consistent power is huge in terms of the live entertainment economy. It might even be reshaping it for comedians who focus on connection over controversy.
That's a great point, and it suggests there's this massive audience appetite for just escapism.
I think that's undeniable. People are genuinely tired.
Mhm.
Tired of the political fights, tired of the constant outrage cycle online. They just want to go somewhere for 90 minutes and laugh, properly laugh. They want to connect over simple shared human truths, the silliness of everyday life, family stuff, weird human behaviors. And that appeal is incredibly broad, crosses demographics, and it's commercially very powerful. It speaks to that basic human need for lightness, for connection, that political commentary just can't satisfy in the same way. It's almost like an antidote to the intensity that fuels satire.
And our documents also mention specific platforms or movements that are really championing this style, like the clean comedy movement or dry bar comedy.
Yes, dry bar comedy is fascinating. They've basically built this significant online presence, almost like an alternative comedy universe. They have a huge library of specials from comedians who are masters of observational storytelling humor. And crucially, it's all clean, no profanity, no controversial topics. Their whole model is about providing accessible, quality stand-up to this global audience that maybe feels overlooked by the big streamers. And they've reached millions, made real money from their online content.
Wow.
Proves there's this massive dedicated market out there for just pure, uncomplicated laughs without any political baggage. It's not niche. It's a thriving parallel world that the mainstream gatekeepers focused on buzz often miss.
But that style still faces challenges, right? Like in critical circles, it can get labeled as safe or less edgy, maybe less important than satire, especially when relevance feels like the main currency.
Oh, for sure. That's probably its biggest hurdle, critically speaking. In a culture that really values immediate relevance and social commentary,
Yeah.
purely observational stuff can sometimes seem less vital,
Yep.
maybe less brave, because it's not tackling the big controversies head on. And there's the viral challenge we talked about. It's just harder for a slower, more nuanced storytelling bit to blow up online compared to a quick, sharp political punch.
Wait, the algorithm problem again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think the massive enduring success of guys like Bargatze shows that timelessness has its own kind of power. A really great joke about family holidays or airports from 10 years ago, still funny, because it hits on something universal. Whereas a political joke from last week, even last month, it can feel dated super quickly. The context changes, it doesn't land anymore. So that longevity, that evergreen quality, that's a different but very real form of power and success. It offers a different kind of permanence.
That's a brilliant point. The shelf life is totally different. So it really sounds like we have these two distinct models of success running side by side in stand-up. The two sides of that fault line, both finding ways to win, but differently.
Precisely. And the sources give us this really interesting comparison of how they stack up audience, acclaim, money. They really are succeeding in different arenas, playing by different rules. Satirical comedy, like we said, tends to get the critical nods, wins the big awards, Emmys, Peabodys, because it's seen as smart, relevant, maybe brave for tackling tough stuff. The audience is often super engaged. But yeah, potentially polarized. You might be preaching to the choir, validating people who already agree, or maybe pushing away those who don't share the politics. Success is measured in buzz, viral moments, maybe shifting the conversation for a bit.
So it's that spike again. Big, bright, maybe short-lived attention tied to the news cycle, creates talk, controversy. Those are its wins.
Perfect way to put it, a spike. Now, contrast that with actual comedy. Fewer major awards, maybe fewer front-page headlines. Critics might praise the craft, the joke writing, the artistry, but maybe not call it necessary in the same way. But the commercial success, especially touring, off the charts like we discussed. The financial power is huge. Ticket sales, merchandise, that's the measure. The audience is broader, less divisive. They're often looking for a different experience. It's about building this loyal, long-term fan base that shows up year after year, no matter the political climate, just because they connect with that comedian's view on universal stuff. It's a deeper, maybe more enduring connection.
And the reports also mention how that relatable, character-based style often leads to other things, like sitcoms, movies, thinking Seinfeld, obviously, or Ray Romano. Everybody Loves Raymond came right out of his stand-up. So it has this different kind of commercial afterlife beyond the stage, a way to reach even wider audiences, maybe more lasting than satire tied to specific moments.
That's a key point.
Yeah.
So you've got this clear split. Satire often wins the buzz war, the awards season. It plays on immediate relevance, intellectual engagement. Actual comedy wins the long-term touring war, often has broader, more lasting mass media reach. Both are incredibly successful, just using different scorecards.
Yeah.
It's not about one being better. They're just playing different games, meeting different needs.
Yeah.
And both are clearly winning their respective games.
Okay, so pulling all these threads together then, what is the state of stand-up today? And where does it go from here? Is it this battle where one form eventually takes over, or can they just keep coexisting? Do they maybe even need each other?
I think all the evidence points towards a really robust, maybe complex, but definitely a coexistence. The future of stand-up, based on everything we've looked at, seems to be about its pluralism, its variety. It's absolutely not a zero-sum game where one has to beat the other. In fact, you could argue a healthy comedy scene needs both. Satire is vital for critiquing power, for helping us process this crazy world. It gives voice to frustration, challenges us. It's a societal pressure valve. But actual comedy is just as vital. For that universal laughter, for fostering connection over shared experiences, for giving us that much-needed break from seriousness. Both tap into fundamental human needs, just different ones. One helps us cope by confronting reality, the other helps us cope by escaping it for a bit.
So the path forward isn't about picking a winner, but making sure both styles have room to breathe, to thrive, to keep getting better at what they do.
Exactly. It's about supporting diverse platforms, making sure there are spaces for all styles. Big arenas for the observational giants, but also online platforms, alternative clubs for the political voices, the experimental stuff. It means venues and festivals consciously showing a range of styles. Maybe audiences learning to appreciate the craft in different forms, whether it's a killer political line or a perfectly timed anecdote about losing your keys. And encouraging comedians to just keep innovating within whatever style they choose, pushing the boundaries of humor itself. Yeah, the pendulum might swing towards satire when times feel particularly charged, like maybe now, but that need for pure, simple laughter, the kind that connects us just as humans, that's fundamental. It'll always have an audience, and it will always, always have its champions.
That's a perfect place to leave it. The state of stand-up is strong because it's diverse. Maybe think about what kind of laughter you seek out and why. Which comedians meet which needs for you. The answer might tell you as much about yourself as it does about comedy right now. Thank you for this fantastic deep dive, and thank you for listening to The Deep Dive.